Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And Josh, raise your right hand, raise your left hand, and when I snap my fingers, your bowels will no longer be irritable.
Oh, Jason's going to put me into a trance in this episode with his sophisticated modern psychiatric techniques that are not at all quackery. So,
hey, it was a step to the next thing is what I feel like. They didn't have the same knowledge. They had to, we used to have a thing called science in this country, Josh, and it took trial and error. And you would get there, and when you proved something, it was proven because it was a fact. But facts aren't facts anymore, Josh. Go back and take your Remvilquin or whatever it is.
Yeah, well, that is, on the one hand, you're correct. On the other hand, here is an instance of the government not wanting to share scientific advancements with the public, much like now. So
government secrets? What are you talking about?
Never.
Maybe things have not changed as much. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are talking about the films of 1946. And we're here at our documentary episode to talk about John Huston's film, Let There Be Light, a movie that was made and intended to be released in 1946, but was banned by the U.S. government and not actually released to the public until 1981. It was part of the series of propaganda films that John Huston made as a member of the U.S. military during World War II. Earlier films of his were released, movies that were made about battles and troop activity during the war, Report from the Aleutians and the Battle of San Pietro. Although both of those were also, I didn't get a chance to watch. I was going to try to watch one, but I didn't. But both of them were also sort of controversial in that they showed, I think, potential failures of planning in certain battles. And of course, the U.S. Army did not want in these films anything that might indicate that they were less than perfect.
Man, this is ringing all too straight of Hormuzzi to me. So,
yeah.
Josh, how many film podcasts can say they've covered multiple military quote unquote docu-films from different countries? Because this is our second one. I got to give you a little dap. Obviously, this has become a well-known documentary now, but I think it took a little research for you to find this one. And not just Huston, who we've talked about, John Ford, who we've talked about, was making movies like this. So we're really doing our patriotic duty today.
We are. And Jason, I don't know, because I know you read a lot of film-related books, but I'm not sure if you've read Five Came Back, which is the book about Huston and Ford, and I'm not sure who else, but five major Hollywood filmmakers who all enlisted in the military during the war and then, came back to Hollywood and how that kind of shaped them.
I do have the book here. And I have to debate, am I going to read that next or the one on the summer of 1981 where sci-fi movies took over the world? I love film books like that, So I do have Five Came Back. At some point, I'll report back to you. I'll come back and report to you guys on it. But it is not it's not. Right now I'm reading Patrick Raddenkeef's new book. Called London Falling. He's my favorite author. So what are you guys reading right now? That's a question for Josh.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Dave's not. I'm not sure Dave can even read what it says on his t-shirt. But I'm reading a horror novel called Mexican Gothic. So just
is it good?
That. I've only started it, so it's we'll see how it goes. But
hopefully it's better than the film American Gothic, which was okay.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, this movie is, so it was part of this. I think it's interesting that, I haven't read that book either, but obviously these filmmakers were eager to join. They joined up. They weren't necessarily, they weren't forced into this. They weren't drafted. They were eager not only to join the military, but also to use their skills as filmmakers to share with the world the successes of the U.S. military. And the idea that, like, there might be some criticism or there might be challenges within that. I think, especially as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you understand that that's part of storytelling, and it doesn't mean that you are trying to denigrate the U.S. military, but that's obviously the way the government kind of saw it.
Right. You're trying to show some honesty there. Dave, this is for you.
Mm-hmm.
5 came back. There is a docu-series, 3 episodes on Netflix. And the 5 directors, Josh, are Ford, William Wyler, Huston, Frank Capra, and George Stevens. We've covered at least 4 of those. I don't think we've gotten to a Stevens movie yet, have we?
No, we haven't. But we've definitely talked about William Wyler and Frank Capra. So,
and we're talking about Wyler again this season.
We are indeed. So huge.
And Capra.
Wow. We're really covering. I feel like we should read this book then, maybe, or we should watch the docuseries.
All right. I'll read the book, Dave.
If only if it was a single documentary movie, then I definitely watch it.
The 3 episodes. It's the 3rd episode really cut you out of this thing.
We'll perhaps come back to this overall topic here, maybe in the epilogue if we get to this. But for now, this was commissioned by the Army Signal Corps. That was the sort of propaganda or public relations arm of the military that Ford was a part of. It was shot at Mason General Hospital on Long Island, where this group of soldiers returning from the war were dealing with what we now call PTSD. That at the time they call, I think it's, psychoneurotic disorders. And these guys were, or what they called shell-shocked. They were dealing with serious mental health challenges. And it's interesting that this movie was banned because it's not like this movie is pessimistic or negative. I mean, in a way, this movie is overly positive about the prospect for a quote unquote cure for these guys with this mental health problem that we understand now is an ongoing, probably lifelong issue that they're going to struggle with.
Yeah. I mean, while watching it, obviously you feel sympathy for the soldiers here. And then you think about how dirty we did our returning Vietnam vets, where they were like villains, like all they did was do what their country told them to do, right? Like they're not the bad guys there. So, and then on top of all that, I mean, as someone, not a PTSD situation, but we all have our mental health issues, and family members have their mental health issues. I think in the last maybe 10 to 15 years, it just became normalized to really talk about it and try to treat it, as opposed to like it was just kind of, not to say there wasn't treatment there before, but it wasn't as mainstream, I'd say.
Yeah, and in a way, this movie, had it been released, could have done something for that. I mean, it seems like one of the main goals here, at least for Huston, maybe the government had different ideas, but one of the main goals of the film is to destigmatize the idea of mental illness and treatment for mental illness, that these guys have, it's not like their fault and they shouldn't be ostracized. There's a whole scene at the end of the movie where they talk about, what would you say to your employer about the fact that you've dealt with this problem? And, would you be able to share that with someone who might be trying to hire you for a job? And so, if this movie had been maybe more widely disseminated, I think, not that it would solve those problems or whatever, but we think of that post-war period, like the 1950s, as a period of extreme repression, right? And if you were mentally ill, you were hiding that away. And this is, in that way, this is very progressive for the time, trying, and especially it's all men, showing men sharing their feelings and how that's a positive thing. And that's not something that should be criticized or hidden away. And yet that is exactly what was done with it.
And Huston, who we love and have talked about before with Maltese Falcon, did something so ahead of the time with hidden cameras in the rooms. So he was getting as real reactions as you could get from both the patients, the doctors, everyone. This was done a decade before other people were doing it. So there's a lot of things you're like, oh, well, we're watching a military educational film of sorts. But there's a lot of interesting things, like you're talking about, obviously from the mental health aspect and also from the filmmaking aspect, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, that's again, I didn't have time to watch those other propaganda films, but I'm sure this applies not only to those Huston films, but also the films from those other filmmakers that you mentioned, that these are talented artists and they're bringing that artistry to these educational or propaganda type films. And there's definitely filmmaking skill on display here, I think. So, that's something to appreciate as well, in addition to, the educational aspect that could potentially, that had the potential to make an impact that, of course, it didn't get the chance to do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we know it just is misguided, right? I mean, the military and can be evil right now. But this just feels like more misguided, like they couldn't get rid of that macho image and show that men had feelings and that there were negative effects from war.
Right. I mean, I think that's the big thing that the government was afraid of, the idea that anyone would see something negative from having gone through the war. I mean, obviously people knew that people died in the war, but these are people who didn't die in the war. And we see that they're not, or at least the people that we see in the movie, none of them appear to be physically injured either. And so this is supposed to be like, this is the win. These are the people who are in the best possible circumstances. And we don't want anyone to think that they're not, that they're not okay or whatever, that it wasn't great when you enlisted in the army and went and beat the Nazis and came home and everything was wonderful.
I don't know what else to say. I'm glad that these guys, I even though they hid the film, I'm glad that the military tried and successfully did treat a lot of people.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and even I think, though, we have this ending that seems to some degree kind of bullshit, the idea that everyone is now fine and they're all going to go off and they're not going to have any other issues. They were helped, even if they continued to struggle. The fact that they had this treatment made a big difference, I'm sure, to all of these people.
Yep.
So because this movie was suppressed, critics generally did not see it in 1946, nor did audiences. However, James Agee, the film critic for The Nation, I'm not sure how, but somehow he was able to see it, and he was a big advocate for this film. He wrote about it in a few different instances, including his article on the best films of 1946. So he said, John Huston's Let There Be Light, a fine, terrible, valuable nonfiction film about psychoneurotic soldiers, has been forbidden civilian circulation by the War Department. I don't know what is necessary to reverse this disgraceful decision, but if dynamite is required, then dynamite is indicated. The War Department has mumbled a number of reasons why it has been withheld. The glaring obvious reason has not been mentioned, that any sane human being who saw the film would join the armed services, if at all, with a straight face and a painfully maturing mind. In a nation with half its forebrain left and 1,000th of its moral intelligence, even such a little suppression as this would cause a monstrous scandal and an adequate fight.
So it's hard to hear this stuff and watch this movie and not think about how terribly we're doing today. Headskip is like firing generals because they're black and because they're women. That's a fact. Like, I'm not just being, liberal Jason over here or whatnot, right? There are generals resigning because they think he's so unprepared, and he's doing this thing where warriors have to be warriors and they have to be macho and this and that. And it's like, being a human, having empathy and sympathy for people probably makes you a better soldier than not, right? Because look at what, the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, things like that. We've seen in the past, there are, just kind of people who either lose it or just have evil intentions. And that's not what we want. We don't want to kill 185 Iranian schoolgirls for no reason. So I just think that, again, what we're going through today, I think we need more stuff like this.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's also interesting, and I feel like we've talked about this with other kind of controversial films or films that address these political things, that as terrible as all of that is right now, it's interesting to look at, especially a period like 1946, which is a time when we have the sort of, I feel like the historical reputation of World War II and post World War II is that there was this big consensus of kind of positivity. People saw this as a justified war. It was, a victory for the United States. The soldiers coming home, like you're saying, they weren't treated like Vietnam vets. They were welcomed with open arms. They were celebrated. And yet here's James Agee writing in The Nation in 1946, talking about the shame of suppressing this movie and the idea that, the military doesn't want anyone to join with a full knowledge of what could happen and how, this nation doesn't have its brains or whatever. And in a way, it's comforting to me to see this and realize, even in this time of national unity, or what has a reputation as a time of national unity, here's something that was going on that this mainstream critic was talking about, and that still is happening right now.
What I do wonder is, was the military more supportive of returning veterans? Because we hear all the time now about VA programs and mental health programs, especially being cut, which is terrible. And like I said, you have to credit these guys, GI Bill, things like, helping them find housing afterwards, stuff like that. And like this movie showcases, whatever the treatments were, I don't think any of the efforts were not authentic here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they all have the best intentions, even if some of these treatments are things that wouldn't be used today and that the effectiveness is questionable. Absolutely. Everyone here has the intention of helping these men and doing everything that they possibly can to improve their lives and help them readjust to civilian life. And as you say, we see things here in this movie about like the GI Bill, about being able to go back to college or being able to start businesses. And, the Army really is trying to support not only the mental health of these people, but the overall well-being of their lives as they return to being civilians. And yeah, that's not so much today, it seems like.
Right. And that's why you get that kind of a part of the reason why we got that big suburban boom in the 50s, and the idea of, you can make a living wage and raise a family in the suburbs by going to work and everything. This was the support that the military gave returning soldiers really helped that. And I do think, that whole greatest generation thing, women working in the factories while the men were at war and stuff like that. Like, we don't have that camaraderie at all. I don't know if we'll ever have that camaraderie again. So it's really a fascinating time period to go back and look at. And, last night I was watching an old movie, and it just maybe I never really kind of crystallized the thought, but in a way, what we're getting to do is like look at history through film, right? We know film history, but we're actually learning about our culture through these movies over time. And that's like really one of the great benefits for us. Like, we learn about what society was, what the thoughts were, how art kind of commented on it. So I like I said, this was a good find, Josh.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And we've talked about that a lot. Whether it's this period, I mean, we talked about the post World War II period a lot in our season from 1953 with movies that were reckoning with, the post war Reconstruction and things like that. And we've talked about Vietnam and all of these things, and of course, and someday people will have distance from 2026 and be able to talk about how the art that we're creating now is reflecting our situation now that we're talking about. And
right. And I always think about, like, what are the movies coming out in 2 years from now that have lived through this period that are going to be talking about it. So, right. That's one of the beauties of what we do.
So because this movie was suppressed for so long, no one else really had a chance to see it until it was released in 1981. So I did grab a couple of reviews from there. And, they have this kind of distance. It's interesting. They have that distance from 1946. But of course, now it's still 45 years ago from now. So this sort of middle perspective. So in 1981, Vincent Canby in the New York Times said, "Let There Be Light is a good, slickly made documentary about the treatment of psychoneurotic combat veterans at Mason General Hospital on Long Island. With its voiceover narration provided by Walter Huston, its use of wipes and dissolves, and its full orchestra soundtrack music, Let There Be Light is an amazingly elegant movie, far different from the kind of documentaries we're now used to. its studied look may have the effect of softening the movie's impact on today's audiences, who've grown up seeing riots, wars, and assassinations live and in color on their home television screens. Yet it's not difficult to understand the force of the film.
Right. I mean, and again, I think we would say even now we're more desensitized to things like that than they were in the 80s. But, I had brought up the kind of filmmaking techniques that were there to get the most honest reactions possible. And I think that was so smart and so ahead of its time and really gave us insight into the treatments and also whether it made the returning soldiers be able to be more natural on camera, or that they didn't even know, exactly how many cameras were filming them or where. Like, it just really, really opened up this thing in a way that I think other techniques wouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, it is really ahead of its time. The idea of a documentary was still sort of like coming into focus at this time. And a lot of what were labeled documentary films, I mean, that the other propaganda film that we talked about, Target for Tonight, in our 1941 season, is all pretty much reenactments. And other Huston propaganda films from this time were that as well. So, I mean, they're what we would now maybe think of as narrative films because they're being performed by actors or maybe by the real people who are reenacting things that they did, but not being filmed as they happened. And this is a much more modern approach where he is actually filming the real interactions of these people and getting that raw footage. And it's absolutely ahead of its time. And that, I think, is what makes this movie fascinating as much as the subject matter, just the way that he was able to do something that other documentary filmmakers just really weren't doing.
Right. I mean, and we've talked about Huston as well, I would say like the definitive noir, or, the one that kind of really laced up the whole genre was Maltese Falcon. So he's a little ahead of his time all the time. Josh, when you say Target for Tonight, I remember the movie we watched, but it makes me think of Andy Sedaris, the low budget action erotic filmmaker from the 80s who was making like Hard Ticket to Hawaii and Malibu Express. Don't you think Target for Tonight would have been a good title for one of those?
Sure. Why not? Maybe he could remake that someday. But if he's still, I don't know if he's still.
We'll get to an Andy Sedaris movie probably.
I hope so. So much similarities between these military propaganda films. And
if you had some of those sexy action-clad women helping you out, that might be good for your mental health too.
True. That's not a technique that they attempted in this.
Donna Spear was not around.
Maybe they should have.
Yeah.
So finally, also in 1981, Owen Gleiberman in the Boston Phoenix said, "The movie simplifies its material by taking a resolutely optimistic view toward the possibilities of cure. Yet it also displays the effects of warfare with an immediacy that would make the most virulent hawk shudder. The soldiers in Let There Be Light are visibly haunted men who might have stepped from the pages of The Naked and the Dead. In their tense stares and somnambulant voices, one catches glimpses of the process by which the fear of death consumes sanity. One can easily understand why the War Department would have wanted this movie held from release. By recording what World War II meant not to our country or the cause of world freedom, but to the individual men who fought it, Let There Be Light reveals that though a modern military conflict may be, quote, just, it is never sane."
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would almost disagree with, not to say that people weren't afraid to die, but what I got more from this was the guilt that they had, survivor's guilt, right? If they survived and, their fellow platoon men did not, and all the questions that come with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a fear of death in some of these, people who experienced an intense attack and managed to survive. And now they're sort of replaying that attack in their mind and re-experiencing that fear of dying. I think there is some of that. We see that guy under the hypnosis who talks about being in, I think it was Okinawa, under fire, and he's, shaking as he's remembering this under the hypnosis. But absolutely, there are a number of people who talk about, all of the people in my guys in my unit died. My best friend, he died. And here they are, they're back home and they don't understand how that is. So that's definitely a big part of it.
Have you ever been hypnotized?
No. Have you?
Just by the song "Hypnotized" by Biggie Smalls. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would try it, but I think you and I are we're so skeptical about some things. I don't know if it would work on us.
I mean, it's a legitimate, as you said, like the practices in this movie are legitimate scientific practices, and even hypnosis is still used in therapy. Maybe not quite the way they use it here, but it's still something. So I don't know. I feel like it could. I've been to a hypnosis show in Las Vegas.
Right. And the first thing they tell you is if you are, a doubter, don't volunteer to be on stage. You have to be open to the process.
Right. Yeah. I think that is true. Although sometimes there are people who end up, going through it, even though they claim to be doubters. So I'm reluctant to, say that I have some sort of extra sophisticated mind that's not susceptible.
I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the sophistication. I think it's the openness of the whole thing.
Yeah. Well,
Dave, cluck like a chicken.
Dave's already
Done.
hypnotized.
Yeah.
Easy stuff. So I guess, obviously none of us had seen this film before, and but we have talked about John Huston, and he is fantastic. Jason, you watched some more John Huston this week, right?
I did. I mean, I know you were ahead of me on some of these things. I got to Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which I hadn't seen. We all love Humphrey Bogart and John Huston as collaborators. And then, we've mentioned him as an actor before. I rewatched Chinatown. It's an obvious classic right there. And I think he was up for Best Supporting Actor. So it was really fun to see older John Huston in that situation. But there's so many more to go. I still haven't seen The African Queen. I still haven't seen Key Largo. These are so fun to watch. And, Bogart and Huston has to be one of the all-time Scorsese De Niro combinations, right, of director and actor.
Yeah, I've seen both of those. I haven't seen The African Queen. It's been a long time, but Key Largo is fantastic. I love. So I didn't get a chance to watch any more Huston. I've seen a bunch, but there's certainly plenty more. And like I said, I was hoping to watch one of those other propaganda movies, but didn't get around to it because I think they're probably worthwhile. A lot of these are, you think, propaganda and like, oh, this is maybe it's of historical interest, but it's not necessarily great filmmaking. But I think there is a lot of really good filmmaking, in this movie and in what those talented filmmakers did during the war, the five who came back.
Well, look at the five that we mentioned, right? Like, right. If you're going to pick five, can't do better than the five that we talked about right there.
Yeah. So anything else you want to say about the background of this film?
Josh, in military terms, the film was known as PMF 5019, if you wanted to look it up that way. The reference, the title "Let There Be Light" is from Genesis 1:3 of the King James Version of the Bible, Josh, which I know you're very familiar with. Totally. And the hospital where the movie took place, where they filmed 75 veterans and shot close to 70 hours of film, was in New York State. I believe it was Deer Park. Yes, Mason General Hospital in Deer Park on Long Island. The last fact I have for you, 20% of wartime casualties are of a psychiatric nature.
Yeah, that is a high number. I mean, and that's what we see here. So that PMF stands for Professional Medical Film, and that was a series that the military put out of educational films all the way through the 1960s. So we will come back then and talk some more general thoughts on Let There Be Light. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1946, we are talking about our documentary pick, Let There Be Light, from director John Huston. And, we were talking earlier about how this is it's a cinematic film, right? This is not just, it's commissioned by the military and it's meant for education, but there's a lot of sophisticated filmmaking techniques here. Is there anything like visually or editing wise that's stood out to you in this film, Jason?
I would have to consider that. For me, it was really the kind of verite aspect of it, the hidden camera aspect of it, which, has gone all the way from this to prank shows at this point in time. But I think it was more of the emotional impact with the filmmaking technique, as opposed to like, whoa, look at this dazzling shot design or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't mean dazzling per se, but I think you can watch this movie and see this is something that was made with intentionality in terms of composition and rhythm and editing. I mean, I think there's a montage of different soldiers all sitting down with the psychiatrist for their sort of first meetings, and we almost like pan across from one to the other in the same rooms the way it's been edited together. And it gives you this sense of scale of how many. I mean, we don't know necessarily. The movie doesn't say, oh, there were 75 people here, but just in that montage, we can see, look at how many of these soldiers there are, and they're all dealing with this problem. So, I mean, I think there is something to be said for how it's put together and how that conveys the emotional content that you're talking about.
The other thing I want to say about that, and it also adds to that point, is you're talking about how this is kind of an early forerunner in the documentary form. And even today, the movie's an hour long. He shot 70 hours, right, on 75 subjects. So the swath that he took to dial in to get the message out is really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and that is, I think we've talked about this a lot. I feel like we talked about this maybe with Salesman, the Maysles brothers film, where it's like so much of the filmmaking in a movie like this is in that editing process, knowing what to include and what not to include and how to fit all those pieces together into something that's compelling to watch. And knowing that just because you have this much footage doesn't mean that your movie should be, 3 hours long or whatever.
Well, it's also so much harder back then. Like now you could do this on iPhones or digital and shoot forever and ever and just store it on hard drives and pull up the clips whenever you want. My guess is these guys were editing on Steam beds, which is what I had to do in college, which I'm glad I did. I was terrible at it, but that's, that's the stuff where you're putting actual film onto these reels and running it through and splicing it with razors and taping it, all skills I'm not good at, so, and then if you mess it up, how do you, fix it and go back and add more? So the editing is a real credit to the film. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, the editing, the cinematography, all of that, and all of this that was uncredited at the time, but is key to the success of this film.
And Josh, if I can interrupt, the editor was William H. Reynolds, who edited The Sound of Music, The Godfather, The Sting, and The Turning Point. Nominated for Academy Awards 7 times and won for The Sound of Music and The Sting.
Yeah, and I think there's a second. I mean, I'm just looking at credits online here. Gene Fowler Jr. also worked as an editor on this film.
Yes,
accomplished.
He edited It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, A Child Is Waiting, Hang 'Em High, and he directed I Was a Teenage Werewolf and I Married a Monster from Outer Space. 2 future Dave picks.
That sounds about right. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's important, though, because it's not just John Huston, famous Hollywood director, who is behind this film, but, the whole crew that he recruits to work on this movie is just as notable and just as talented as he is. This is every bit as accomplished a production as any famous John Huston narrative film.
Right. I would agree with that. Again, we're talking about one of the masters here. You guys know I'm working on a documentary now, and our friend Shahab, who's my editor, who I met at a Piecing It Together live event, thanks Dave, is so essential. I can't do what I know how to put stories together in my head, but I can't lay them out and add those kind of flourishes and technical touches that he's doing, and vice versa. He's so good at that, but the actual layout has to come from what I'm good at, which is kind of building a story. So it's so important that you are simpatico and you give each other room to utilize your collaborator's strengths.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a definite collaboration here with Huston and everyone else who's worked on it. And in a way, it's a collaboration with the subjects, right? With the soldiers and especially with the psychiatrist, because I'm sure he has to go through and talk to these doctors about, okay, well, what are you doing? What is your approach? What kinds of things are going to happen here that I can film, and how does this all go? And we see so many different techniques in this film. I mean, we've talked about the hypnosis a bunch, but, we see group therapy sessions, we see individual one-on-one therapy sessions, we see their use of sodium amytal, which is another thing that is not done anymore. But all of these things that are often really very striking to watch, to see these guys go through this.
Well, let me add to that. It's not just knowing it from the kind of organizational standpoint, but you have to create trust with your subjects, right? Or you're never going to get something real, something honest, something beneath the surface from these people. So whether that was because they're all military men and the military wanted this film, and Huston already is established as a major filmmaker and obviously pro-military, or whether that was because Huston had really worked on creating these relationships, which I'm guessing he did if he's shooting 70 hours of footage for this. Like, it's so important, man. And it's that's not a skill that everyone has.
Yeah, and I think that is probably what happened, because you see that he considered, he looked at a whole bunch of different places, like, where do we shoot this film, and settled on this Mason General because they were amenable, because they were open to it. So these are people who are interested in working with him. And I would have to think that the psychiatrists here too probably were eager for the opportunity to share their work, to show the world what they're doing that might be misunderstood and how they're helping these soldiers. And then, they lost out on that opportunity.
And one thing I got to credit Huston for, again, 1946, one of the main subjects is a black soldier who came back, right? And like that, again, like you don't think of it, we don't think of it in a color, whatever color you are, right, situation. But in 1946, it would have been very easy to just pick 5 white dudes and just follow them around. So, bravo to Huston on like treating people as people.
Right. I mean, and there's never a mention of race in this film. I mean, we see those. I think there's a couple black soldiers.
There's just one main one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's one who gets a good amount of attention, and we see his therapy session and him talking about his sweetheart. I think, I don't remember if she's his wife or his fiance, and we see her show up later. But yeah, I mean, and it's completely integrated, which is something that the military overall was not at the time. But, those black soldiers are there. They're in the group therapy sessions. And, whether there was any sort of racism behind the scenes here, we don't see it in the film. They're treated with the same respect and the same gravity as the white soldiers. And that is something, I mean, we don't know if Huston got any pushback on that. It seems like there was so much pushback on everything else that maybe that wasn't a factor, but it is notable.
I mean, literally, I mentioned earlier how they're erasing black military history today, 80 years later. So What the fuck, man?
Pete Hegseth would not like this movie. He would not.
No. And also he's got a Nazi tattoo, so he probably wouldn't approve of any of it. So, but
does not contribute to the warrior mindset here at all.
But one thing I want to say is, and it would be interesting to watch some of the other military films because, by the 5 who came back, because, especially Ford, Huston, we know a lot of their movies, and imagine if they did this today and you have like, Paul Thomas Anderson, right? And people like that are, Barry Jenkins, they're going to do a new series, and they're taking Celine Strong and, people like that, and doing 5 new versions of military films. I wonder what that would be. It's kind of fascinating, especially if you know the narrative, the fictional work that these guys have done.
Yeah, I mean, I think today this is just, again, it's something that would not be done. The equivalent we have of this today is not what you're describing, because none of those people would ever do that. The equivalent that we have today is like Michael Bay, is him working hand in hand. No, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, it's him working hand in hand with the military, as he does, to kind of promote and support.
I think Clint Eastwood as well.
Yeah, Clint Eastwood too. But I mean, Bay has worked directly with the military on numerous films of his, and I think that's what we have, is this sort of bombastic, over the top, jingoistic tone, rather than someone like Huston, where again, maybe it was even then it was challenged, right? He had difficulty. He clashed with the government over his attempt to put nuance into these films. But, at least he was attempting that, and he wanted to. Filmmakers of that skill level wanted to participate, and I don't think anyone really would be that way today.
I could see Angel Studios trying to do something like that. So
right, and they probably have.
Yeah.
So, Jason, I mean, was there a particular moment in this film, like emotionally, that you felt was the most powerful, a session or anything like that?
I mean, I do think, a lot of the main subjects we see a man with a stuttering problem or a man who can't walk. On the main subjects, we see these guys coming back, and one guy can't walk because of his experience over there. And another guy is stuttering because he's not able to express what he went through. That might be the Okinawa situation that you were talking about. So
no, I think that's a different guy. The stutterer is a different guy.
Okay, yeah, I thought that the stuttering especially, which was a mental block. These were all mental blocks in certain ways. What was really kind of, you were really rooting for them to overcome that. And then at the end, they're all playing baseball and just having, good old fashioned American fun. And I really thought that was a great way to end it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is like a great way that we can feel good about what's happened here. But, as like Owen Gleiberman points out in his review, it's kind of bullshit too. It's not like these guys are all just like A-okay now and they're all going to go home and be fine. This is something that hopefully they'll be able to get some further support and treatment. And who knows if that's the case. But these are problems that people deal with for the rest of their lives.
100%. At least this was a step in that direction. Yes. And again, we know a lot more about mental health today than we did back then. But maybe that was it. Like, hey, you could go home. We're going to help you find a place to live, or wherever you do live, we're going to find a hospital near you where you can get ongoing treatment. I don't know if this was just like, hey, once you're done, you're done. Right.
I mean, it's hard to say for sure what happened to these people afterwards. But
one other thing I want to say, Josh, because this is inpatient, I think that was probably really helpful for the subjects to have other people around them that they could relate to. And, maybe they weren't able to express everything to their therapists at first, but I'm sure they were able to commiserate with people who had been through similar things.
Right. And I do wonder that also about the therapists, because these are, I mean, they're real psychiatrists, but they're also all military officers. And you see multiple times in these sessions where they're asking questions of these soldiers and then they say, yes, sir, or whatever. Like, these are still superior officers. So I think there's still probably this emotional barrier that ideally you don't have with a therapist. You're able to be completely open. You don't have to, I mean, maybe they're an authority figure in a way, but you don't have to be so deferential to them or, have them the military mentality of just, I do what this person says because they're a superior officer. So I think that what you point out there is important, that they don't have that with their fellow, with their fellow enlisted men, and they can maybe be more open and share and realize that they're not alone. That if they just go home and they're in civilian life, they might think I'm the only one who feels this way, and that's not true.
Yeah, Josh, what have you been working on with your therapist lately?
Oh, so many things. I think,
Dave, we got to make a supercut of when I dig just a little too deep with Josh over the years.
That would be great.
Oh, Jason, you got to get back to therapy too.
I do. I'll tell a real story. After my mom died, I really needed therapy again. So I was in therapy for a while. Our good friend Allison Duck had recommended a therapist that I liked. And then she moved, and the telehealth didn't really work for me. So, after COVID, I had kind of stopped. And then my mom died in 2023, and I really needed a therapist. And it was illuminating because every therapist in town was too booked up, or the ones that I could see wouldn't accept my insurance. So I basically had to go through that process on, obviously my friends and family were there, but I had to go through it on my own without any professional help. And that's how people fall through the cracks in society without getting the help that they need, So that was an interesting experience, and it shouldn't have happened to me or anybody else that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel lucky to have a therapist that I can trust. And I know, when that happened, I was trying to help you out, and it's very frustrating to not be able to find the right person and someone that you can afford and who is available and all that. So, I mean, but I think that's true. What you're saying is that people fall through the cracks like that now for that reason. And these guys could have fallen through the cracks, and maybe they will after this movie ends. We don't know. But, without that kind of support and without that kind of treatment, it makes it so much harder to just handle everyday life. And this is something that these guys are getting that people maybe didn't always get at this time.
Yeah, we can look back now and see the ravages of alcoholism on a lot of these people, like not necessarily the people in this movie, but of soldiers returning who needed to take the edge off to make it through each and every night. And like we said, 20% of military deaths are psychological, I think, suicide related. So it's just something that needs to be an ongoing priority for all of us in this country, military and otherwise, mental health. So fix us.
Yes. And I mean, and the development too, as someone who's been in a lot of therapy, I mean, there were definitely moments in this movie where the psychiatrist would say certain things and I would be like, oh, that is not what you should say to someone in this situation, or that is victim blaming. I mean, the one thing that really struck out to me one time is in one of the group therapy sessions, and the psychiatrist is asking these guys about, their childhoods and like trauma from the past or whatever, which is of course important. But then at one point he gets to saying something, I don't know the exact wording, but something along the lines of like, behind every I can't, there's really an I won't. And the idea that he's essentially blaming these guys, saying like, oh, it's not really that you're unable to do something. You just don't want to. You just got to buck up. And I feel like that's a very not productive way to approach therapy. So, I mean, there's certain moments, even though this is very well intentioned, where you think maybe this is screwing these guys up also additionally in some fashion.
Right. But Josh, who knows, in 20 years, you might look back and say, oh, what I was told at this point in time is completely misguided now.
True. That is possible. One hopes not. But,
that's why we need it on record what you're going through right now. So we have the document 20 years from now to see
right. Yes, exactly. So that I can show this to someone and just determine how I was messed up. So, Dave, do you have any thoughts on this movie?
I just kept thinking during this, even though it was suppressed for so many years, like it's great that someone even thought to film these guys, because like you guys have been saying the whole time, like this is definitely a subject that even today is still just constantly ignored. And the fact that somebody thought to film this and see what's going on with these people is actually, a really awesome thing.
And Dave, you're so even keeled all the time. What are you hiding?
We'll find out eventually, I guess.
Dave's under hypnosis.
Yeah,
that's the reason.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just fully suggestible. So should we rate this one out of 5 hypnosis sessions?
Yeah, 5 hypnotizings, if you will. Josh, I gave it 3. In the end, it is what it is. But I was really glad that we watched it, and it is a worthwhile viewing.
Yeah, I give it 3 as well. I think you're right. I mean, it's very valuable to watch. I mean, it's on like the Criterion channel, and that's a good place for it. And I believe it's in the public domain, so you can watch it in a lot of places. But it's a fascinating artifact. It is a bit like, it is an educational film ultimately, so there's some stilted aspects to it. But I'm glad we watched it, definitely. And I'd be curious to see more of these propaganda films from the 5 who came back. So, Dave, how would you rate this?
I'm also going to go with 3. Also, seems like a really important movie. Probably wouldn't watch it again or anything, but it's a good movie.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's something that can be difficult to watch at times, but is valuable to have seen. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Let There Be Light. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1946, we have been talking about John Huston's documentary, Let There Be Light. And I mean, a big part of the legacy here that we've already been talking about, of course, is the fact that it was banned by the War Department until 1981. And Jack Valenti, who was the head of the MPAA for decades, was the one who kind of put pressure on the Secretary of War at the time to allow it to be released. It was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 1981. And obviously, given some kind of limited theatrical release, based on those reviews that I got, it played at least in New York and in Boston. And but it wasn't until decades later that it was really fully restored. It was added to the National Film Registry in 2010 by the Library of Congress. And the version that we would have watched, restored by Milestone, wasn't finished until 2012. So a long time before this finally got its due.
Right. And obviously, streaming really opens this up for people to see more regularly. As you know, I hate the MPAA. So not a big Jack Valenti fan, but I credit him for this.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the MPAA did do a lot of negative things in terms of censorship, and Valenti was a big part of that. But, here he's fighting against censorship, which is good. And it's also good that, John Huston didn't live to see this fully restored, but he was alive in 1981 and still working. So, he was able to see that this film that he obviously had a great passion for finally was being shown to general audiences, which I'm sure was gratifying for him.
And Huston said that the military banned it because they wanted to maintain that warrior myth that we have discussed. So he was aware of what was going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that exact warrior myth or the warrior mindset or whatever is something that we hear a lot about right now, sadly.
So Dave is the big PTA head on here. Dave, did you recognize that the Master had borrowed lines from this? And did you know that this movie is an extra on the Master DVD release?
I did not know that part. And but I did read after watching this about how big of a major influence this was, like pretty much the main influence on PTA's The Master.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I haven't seen The Master since it was first released, but I'm guessing maybe some of those one-on-one sessions that where they dig into, the motivations and the psyches of these guys are similar to those sessions in The Master. I don't know. I don't recall.
I don't know either. I'd have to watch that again as well.
I think so. There's a lot of that, but also just the idea of, well, what if we continued to follow one of these guys into whatever he's getting himself into without continued help? I don't know.
I have to admit, The Master was my least favorite PTA movie that I saw at the time, so I got to rewatch it.
Yeah, I'm also not really a big fan of that one in terms of his filmography. But I never would have guessed that this is something that influenced that kind of film. So, showing you also how widely he is, how well versed he is in these minutia of film history. So maybe he would sign up to follow in the footsteps of John Huston and make a movie for the military. You never know.
Yeah. I think it could happen. Josh, what is Maltese Falcon your favorite Huston movie, or what is, Josh?
I don't know. That is great. We talked about all this in our episode on the Maltese Falcon. I know you watched The Treasure of the Sierra Madre and weren't that into it, but I do love Treasures of the Sierra Madre. I love Key Largo. Those are both great, well-known collaborations with Bogart, as you were mentioning. As we've established, I'm a big Bette Davis fan, and a film he made with her called In This Our Life, I think, is really good. And much later in his career, I do love Fat City as well.
I know we talked about that too. Fat City is an all-timer for me.
Yeah, those are all great. And, there's many more. I've seen a bunch, but there's so many others that I would love to check out. He worked steadily from the 1940s through the 1980s, was nominated for 15 Oscars, and won only for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre for writing and directing. He won Oscars for that one.
Well, he also had acting nods for The Cardinal and Chinatown. So
yeah, an amazing, amazing figure. So,
the whole family, it's Hollywood royalty.
Right. And we've talked about Walter Huston as well. And he's the one here doing the narration in this film. And I think as much as we mentioned the kind of educational tone, he gives it a more natural feel in the narration versus someone who is like a traditional educational narrator.
I'd say so. We'll get to Angelica Houston. I have no doubt about it. Dave, did you know the co-writer is your favorite filmmaker, Charles Kaufman? Oh, not the same one, I guess. So.
Yeah, different guy.
No.
This Charles Kaufman was a short story writer for The New Yorker, wrote 3 books, and was nominated for a BAFTA for Best British Screenplay for the story of Esther Costello, and nominated for an Oscar in 1962 for Freud, The Secret Passion, with Wolfgang Reinhardt.
There we go. Well, more interest in the history of psychiatry there with Freud.
I'd say so. Josh, we've mentioned so many of these technical elements, so we have to mention Stanley Cortez, the director of photography, who has 2 Oscar noms. He was on a few little movies. Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons, Charles Laughton's The Night of the Hunter. So I think he did all right for himself.
Yeah, I mean, and he's one of several. Again, like the editors, there's a whole team of cinematographers here, but all major talents in Hollywood. Dmitry Tiomkin, who does the music here, we just talked about for the score to Duel in the Sun earlier this season. But another major Hollywood composer who worked for decades. So I mean,
yeah, 4 Oscars, including for High Noon and The Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah, I mean, this is every bit as accomplished as any major Hollywood production. So because the Army decided not to release this movie, they still, however, wanted to release something that addressed this subject. So they instead enlisted Joseph Henneberry to direct a scripted film called Shades of Grey, which downplays the interracial integration, as well as has a much more upbeat, even though this movie itself has this kind of upbeat tone at the end. It implies that these guys have been cured, that they're going to go back to normal life. But Shades of Grey, even more so. And it was interesting. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I just kind of skimmed through it to see what they've done. And there are some direct recreations of scenes in the Huston film. There is the soldier who has the difficulty, who can't walk and is shown being treated for that. And there's the soldier who undergoes hypnosis to recall that battle in Okinawa. But it's all kind of simplified, and a lot of the detail of it, the procedural detail, is glossed over. And what was interesting to me, though, more than that, is that there's a whole extra segment in there, because it's a scripted film, where they show soldiers being treated while still on the front lines. And the idea that they could go through like a handful of psychiatric sessions and then be sent right back into combat, and how positive this is. Like, look at this, we can put them right back on the front lines. And I think that's what the military wanted to show here. And that's what they decided to release.
Josh, what would your position be in the Army?
Dead.
Yeah.
I think.
Boom. Gave it to him. Softball, baby. So, yeah.
I feel
my
like
grandfather was in the Army.
In that same boat, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather, my lovely grandfather, Van Harris, who I love very much, was in the Army and had to go AWOL so he could marry my grandma on Christmas.
Oh, wow. Was he in combat?
No, he wouldn't be good in combat. My uncle might have been, his brother might have been, but we're artists in this family, Josh.
Yeah, my grandfather was a radio operator in World War II, but I think not ever on the front lines.
Yeah,
but he used the GI Bill then to get a master's degree, and that I think helped set him up for success in his life. So it's very important.
Yeah, that happened. My old acting coach Joseph Bernard, who's a legend, also used the GI Bill, and he ended up studying acting in England, and then went over to New York to study under Stella Adler. So we can still do good things for people in this country who serve us, Josh.
We can. It's theoretically possible. So I was really curious, we've been talking a lot about what happened to these guys afterwards? Were they able to get further treatment? Were their lives positive and successful? And I mean, unfortunately, I didn't see any information about follow-ups. I mean, part of the reason that the government claimed that they couldn't release the movie is because they lost the releases that these soldiers signed
and would not issue new releases.
Right. So the names of these guys were never necessarily released. I don't know if Huston or anyone ever made an effort to follow up with them. There was nothing on that I could find. But the one thing that I did find that I found fascinating, and I went down a slight rabbit hole, the only other named credited person on screen, other than Walter Huston as the narrator, is Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist who conducts these hypnosis sessions. And we see him mainly, again, in that session with the soldier recalling the battle in Okinawa. So I looked him up, and after this, he is famous for a hypnosis session he conducted in 1964 of a couple who are the first ever case of claiming to be abducted by aliens. And because of his hypnosis sessions with this couple, they became extraordinarily famous. Barney and Betty Hill, one of the most famous
in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't. You know what? I didn't note that down. But
I've listened to many podcasts about them.
Have you?
Yeah, there are just things that you cannot explain that are, you just can't explain it. So anyone who thinks that they're liars, I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that apparently, he conducted this hypnosis session, and as a psychiatrist, his conclusion was not that they were liars necessarily, I think, but that they were sort of
fabulous.
No. I mean, that's just lying. I mean, that they were kind of sublimating traumatic experiences into this idea of having been abducted by aliens. They were an interracial couple in the 1960s, experiences racism and harassment. And he didn't think that they were really abducted by aliens. But because this hypnosis session was leaked to some journalist who then wrote a book, he became kind of the emblem of the process of recovering memories via hypnosis about alien abduction. And Jason, I know you said you've listened to podcasts. Did you ever see the 1975 movie The UFO Incident, starring James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons as this couple?
No, but I would watch that, and I would listen to more podcasts on this stuff. So, yeah, have you seen that movie, Josh?
No, I have not. I mean, I didn't know anything about this. I just looked him up thinking that maybe I'd get some information about his credentials or something, and then discovered this whole thing about him. And he is a character in that movie played by Barnard Hughes, who we may have discussed in our episode on The Lost Boys, playing the grandfather in that film.
Barnard, good name.
Yeah.
Hey, so, that's a whole interesting thing, man. And especially now as more is being released on, we don't call them UFOs anymore. What do we call them now? UAPs or something?
Yeah.
So I don't doubt it. I bet they were abducted, Josh.
You think so? You think they really were abducted and weren't just sort of processing trauma?
There's how specific would you have to be to get your stories exactly lined up to do that?
I mean, I don't know. I just kind of read a bit of, a couple of news articles and stuff. So obviously I didn't get into the detail that you did, but I tend to trust the psychiatric evaluation over the desire to believe in aliens. But, it's possible, I suppose.
Well, two things. I think on the podcast, they do play portions of the hypnosis session. So it would be interesting. And two, are you saying you don't believe in life beyond our planet, Josh?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying I don't necessarily believe that life has come here and abducted random people.
Yeah. I'd make a list of people for them to abduct and just take away forever from us.
Yeah. I mean, let's pick some ones. Let's make a list.
I think we mentioned a few in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we did. So anything else you want to say about the legacy of this movie?
I just think it's cool that it was finally released. Who knows what else the military is hiding from us, both factually and filmatically, I would say. I don't know what else there is to say, but this is an interesting, I don't even want to call it a subgenre, a subgenre that we're kind of looking into. And I'm guessing we'll find another somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially from this wartime period, that's a lot of what was going on in documentary filmmaking. So if we do another year from this, we'll probably end up with another similar film.
Dave keeps begging for Triumph of the Will for some reason.
Gotta do it.
It's historically notable, so we may just get to it. So we'll see.
That's true.
But that is Let There Be Light, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can hypnotize us online and on social media.
I'm into it. Let's get it, guys. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy on all the things. You could find us at Awesome Movie Pod, the website, or Awesome Movie Year on Instagram and Facebook.
You can check out some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I'm at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you check out this movie or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Well, Josh, it's your pick. Why don't you tell us?
I will. I have picked Cluny Brown, the final film from Ernst Lubitsch, a wonderful comedy that I hope you guys will enjoy. So tune in next time for that. And thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.